Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating, deeply practical strategy for completely transforming student confidence. We're going to look at how the incredibly simple act of recording a thought, just raw, unfiltered, ungraded thought, can unlock a level of student engagement that you honestly might not have thought was possible. Now, if you're an educator, you know exactly the agonizing moment I'm talking about. The blank stare, right? You hand out a prompt, and the room just falls dead silent. Not a productive, buzzing kind of silence, but a paralyzed one. You've got students staring blankly at a page, their pencils hovering but never actually dropping, entirely frozen by the fear of making a mistake. Today, we're going to explore exactly how to break that paralysis.
Okay, let's dive into this and see how we can free our students from that perfectionism. We can actually look at a surprisingly relevant source of inspiration from the world of comedy. In his 2020 book, which compiled material from his entire 45-year career, Jerry Seinfeld revealed his meticulous, almost obsessive creative process. He saves absolutely every single idea on a physical yellow legal pad. He never throws a single thought away, no matter how half-baked it might seem at the time. His philosophy when he sits down to write isn't to immediately produce a polished, stadium-ready joke. His approach is remarkably simple. Expect nothing, accept anything. He focuses entirely on the habit of writing rather than the immediate quality of the idea. That level of vulnerability, that willingness to just get the messy, chaotic inner workings of your brain down on paper without immediate judgment, that is the exact magic we want to capture in our classrooms.
And that brings us to the title of his book, Is This Anything? This is that iconic, incredibly vulnerable question that comedians ask one another when they're testing out a new bit in the back of a dark comedy club. They aren't asking if a joke is perfect. They aren't asking if it's ready for a Netflix special. They just want to know if there's a spark. Like, is there a pulse to this idea? Now think about the absolute social minefield that is a middle or high school classroom. Asking a teenager to put their raw, unpolished thought on paper is essentially asking them to step up to an open mic and risk bombing in front of all their peers. But just imagine if we could cultivate a classroom culture where students actually feel safe enough to share their roughest ideas, simply asking, hey, is this anything?
Section 1. Belief over skill. The real barrier to student writing. So the crucial point is, to get to that level of psychological safety, we have to honestly address the root of the problem. And that means addressing how we, as educators, often misdiagnose exactly why our students struggle. When a student is just sitting there, not writing anything, our automatic assumption is usually a lack of skill. We think, oh, they forgot the vocabulary, or they don't grasp the grammar rules, or they can't remember how to structure a thesis statement. But the real barrier is overwhelmingly a lack of belief. A student will often internally dismiss their own thinking before their pencil ever even hits the paper. They look at the blank page, they have a thought, and instantly they convince themselves that their thought is stupid or obvious or just not what the teacher wants to hear. So the fundamental issue we have to tackle isn't throwing more grammar worksheets at them right out of the gate. It's proving to them that their ideas possess inherent value.
And how do we actually build that belief? Well, we have to deliberately engineer an environment where the brain is forced to engage without an easy escape hatch. We live in an era where if a screen is glowing, the temptation to let a bot or an AI like ChatGPT do the heavy lifting is practically irresistible. By physically disconnecting to think, by relying on consistent technology-free output, we create this really necessary friction. When students can't just outsource their thinking to a search engine, they're forced to sit with their own original ideas. They have to elaborate on their own hunches. This manual synthesis naturally builds higher-order thinking simply because the student is doing the cognitive heavy lifting entirely on their own power.
Section 2. Disconnecting to think. The inquiry-focused lens. Let's look at a really practical, profound application of how this tech-free, low-stakes writing fundamentally shifts student mindsets over time. The author of our source material recalls a college history class where the professor started every single session exactly the same way. He would write a complex historical thought or prompt on the board. Then, for 5 uninterrupted minutes, students just had to write as many open-ended questions as possible about that prompt. Just questions, no answers allowed. Think about the atmosphere of those 5 minutes. The first minute is usually agonizing silence, just a struggle to come up with anything. But by minute 3, the dam breaks. Over the course of a semester, the paralyzing pressure to ask one perfect question just vanishes, and it's replaced by a rushing volume of curious thoughts filling the page. When this exact same 5-minute technique is applied to secondary students, the psychological shift is just incredible. Initially, students naturally play it safe. They ask basic, literal, what questions just to get something down on paper. But as they realize the red grading pen has truly vanished, an amazing sense of cognitive safety takes over. Their brains start working harder because they aren't afraid of being wrong anymore. They naturally shift to deeper, inferential, how and why questions. The sheer act of practicing inquiry without the threat of a grade makes them significantly more confident when it's finally time to share those deeper ideas with the rest of the class.
Section 3. The Composition Notebook, a legal pad for the classroom.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how this works across different subjects. Because where does all this raw, messy thinking actually live? It lives in the classic black and white marbled composition notebook. This is the student's version of Jerry Seinfeld's yellow legal pad. It's a safe, completely offline, age-old staple that houses their daily intellectual output. And this is absolutely vital across every single subject, not just English. Picture a math student looking at a terrifying complex calculus graphic and simply writing down questions about the shapes or variables they see before anyone even tries to solve it. Or science students jotting down wild, raw predictions for a lab outcome before the experiment begins. Or social studies students freely mapping out messy cause and effect webs for historical events. Low-stakes writing is a universal cognitive tool for processing new information, regardless of the class.
To really ground this practice in educational theory, we need to talk about free writing. This is a concept popularized by writing studies expert Peter Elbow. Free writing is simply the practice of writing freely to organize ideas without a strict agenda. Think of it like a runner stretching before a marathon. You would never, ever grade the stretch, but you also absolutely cannot run the race without doing it. Free writing validates the deeply important concept that all writing has a purpose, namely, getting your brain moving and making unexpected connections, even if it isn't strictly aligned to some 5-paragraph rubric.
I absolutely love this dramatic, visceral advice from Elbow. If your pencil stops moving, the room is going to blow up, just keep writing. The main goal here is to keep the physical, mechanical act of writing intimately connected to the cognitive act of thinking. You're basically trying to outrun the student's inner critic. If the hand stops moving, the brain has time to pause, judge the thought, and censor it. If the hand is moving faster than the brain can judge, the student wins. It completely eliminates the chance for a student to pause and give you that heartbreaking verbal disclaimer we hear all the time. Hey, I know this is bad, but they don't have time to think it's bad. They just have to keep moving.
Section 4. Fun with low stakes. Gamifying writing.
Let's move to and see how this builds into an actual classroom activity. We have to acknowledge a fundamental biological reality. Speaking is instinctively wired into the human brain. Writing is not. Writing takes immense, deliberate effort. So to make this accessible and honestly even joyful for hesitant students, we can gamify the process. Imagine a 20-minute fun Friday routine that goes like this. Step 1, in pure chaos, everyone writes 5 nouns on scratch paper and tosses them into a container. Step 2, students draw 5 random slips. Step 3, they have to write a short paragraph that somehow, logically, uses those 5 completely unrelated nouns. Step 4, they read it aloud and classmates try to guess which nouns were the random inserts. It's loud, it's funny, and it's just a fantastic respite from the weekly academic grind.
Now, you might look at a noun game and think, okay, that's just Friday afternoon fluff. But actually, scratch that. This is a masterclass in stealth learning. When you remove the specter of a grade and the fear of a red pen, you spark genuine resourcefulness. The students have to figure out how to make entirely unrelated words fit together coherently. They're forced to build transition sentences. They're experimenting with sentence variety and context clues. They are doing incredibly high-level, complex syntactic problem solving, but they don't even realize it because their brain is just trying to win a game.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it brings us all the way back around to where we started. Back to Jerry Seinfeld, standing over a decades-old collection of yellow legal pads. He noted, "A lot of people I've talked to seem surprised that I kept all these notes. I don't understand why they think that. What could possibly be of more value?" That right there is the beating heart of this entire pedagogical approach. Validating a student's identity as a thinker and a learner starts with proving to them day in and day out that their raw, unfinished, messy thoughts have immense, undeniable value.
Which leaves us with a lingering, provocative question to wrap things up. How will you design opportunities in your own classroom to prove to your students that their ideas are worth keeping? Whether it's a chaotic Friday noun game, a frantic 5-minute question drill, or simply handing out a blank composition notebook and asking them to keep the pencil moving, the goal remains exactly the same. Capture the raw thought, give it a safe place to live, revisit it, refine it, and watch as one simple, ungraded habit alters a student's entire academic trajectory. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this sparks some extraordinary new ideas for your own environment. Keep those pencils moving.